Okay, good morning and welcome to Just Daf It. Daf Yomi Shir. We're learning Mesachas Kesubos, Daf Zayin, number 7. We have a fantastic shir for you today. A lot of very fundamental things we'll talk about, fundamental and practical. We're going to start the sugya about Sheva Brachos, about when you say Sheva Brachos, when you don't say Sheva Brachos. Eventually in Daf Ches, tomorrow we'll get to what the actual Sheva Brachos are, and maybe I'll give you a nice vort so you can say when you're sitting at the chuppah, right, before they're waiting for the chassan and kala to walk down. In Israel, they don't really have seats, but in America, you have seats there. You have nothing to talk about. You're on your phone trying to look like you have something to do. When you really have nothing to do, right? You're on your phone. You're trying to make small talk to people. I'm going to give you maybe, I'm going to make a separate Ian share for it, but I'll try to throw in something a nice quick word that you can say to your friend, hey, listen, we're learning Mesachas Kesubos, I have this nice idea on Sheva Brachos. And then when they do the Sheva Brachos and the vort is talked about, the bracha where you talked about the vort, you give a little wink to your friend, like, I got you, like, yeah. And then you throw in, like, check out, Ben Seal Lang, YouTube, because that's where I got it from. This is how I get my name out there. I think I'm doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. But listen, it's good to have these things back in your back pocket. Just sit there, you're waiting there for 10, 15, 20 minutes. You're looking at that card with all the names of the people that are going to walk down. I don't know what to do with yourself. All right, Israel, it's easier. You just stand outside, you pretend like you don't see the other person. When you sit down, you feel like you talk to that person more. When you're standing up, you just wander around, I don't know, between the crowd. All right, not fixing a place. All right, let's start from the top of Zayim and Aleph. The Gemara says, Rav Ami, the second line, Rabbi Ami Sharli Mimoel B'Tchila B'Shabbos. We're discussing on Davav, number 6, whether you're allowed to do B on Shabbos. He allowed it. Ami Rabbanan V'Halo Ksiva Ksuvah. So there's a different problem. There was no Ksuva. Right? Everyone's mocking to write a Ksuva before you get married. That's very important, actually, because the Gemara says later on in Daf Nun Zayin, Rameir says if you get married without a ksuba, you're not allowed to have bia without a ksuba, because one of the reasons they're masaking ksuba, they made a ksuba, is that a woman should be confident that the man's not going to just divorce her in a second, because it costs him money to divorce her. So therefore, it's sort of cheap for her to be with him, and he could just divorce her any second. So you need a ksuba. It's like zera to have bia without a ksuba. Amalahu. And he says, you're right, we don't have the ksuba now. Just give her some metaltal and it's worth, I don't know, $3,000. Give him the laptop. He should give her his laptop, his new Dell laptop or his new Mac, and give it to her, and that would be good, because then she could hold on to it. She can say, you didn't pay me my ksuba, I'm taking, because the ksuba is tonight based in. Even if you don't write one, you're owed it. So now she has what? It's hard to collect money even if there's a judgment against you. But now you got the laptop, so therefore you're good to go. Zid Sharon Mibal B'Tchila B'Shabbos, he allowed to do Biyah Rishon on Shabbos. He could have Amir Zid Guvi Bal B'Tchila B'Shabbos. Zid himself took matters into his own hand. And when he got married, he was ball as Biyah Rishon on Shabbos. Rav Yehuda Sharon Mibal B'Tchila B'Yom Tov. Rav Yehuda allowed it on Yom Tov. Amir Papi is ready to Rav. L'Tema B'Yom Tov the Shari Haba Shabbos. Don't say Rav Yehuda only allowed on Yom Tov, and on Shabbos he would say, do it in that feel with Shabbos Nami Shar. Shabbos also would be mutter. The reason he said Yom Tov, because that's what happened. That was the case he was asked about. Rav Papa Mishmei the Rav Papa asked, arguing Rav Papi, I don't know if they're related. Yom Tov Shari b'Shabbos Asr. Yom Tov is mutter, and Shabbos is Asr. That's what he meant to say. Rav Papa, what's the reason to make a distinction? Right, the reason you allow to do Biyah Rishon on Shabbos is because what's the problem, theoretically, the problem of Biyah on Shabbos, according to most reasoning, most thought, is because you make a Chabura on Shabbos, right? To make a Chabura on Shabbos is a malacha. So, Yom Tov, there's a head there, Ochal Nefesh is mutter, things that you need preparatory malachos in order to make food, you're allowed, the Torah permits you to do on Yom Tov. But certain things that are not for the preparation of food, they're not necessarily mutter, but there is a concept. The Gemara and Daf Yud Beis and Beitza has a machlokas between Bishama and Yisrael, whether we follow a concept, and therefore you can carry basically anything outside. You can do hotzah on anything, because just like you got to take out, carry out food that you're going to bring with you to eat in the park and your picnic on Yom Tov, so therefore you can do hotzah for anything, for your keys or anything like that on Yom Tov, because if they allowed part of it, where we know this concept, this broader concept, is not really clear as to Machlokas. I think when I was in Rayonis on Sachs this year in YU, he's now the dean of landers. So I don't know if I can say, obviously he was in YU at one time for a long time. I was in the share then for a couple of years. He said there's like 5 different sources for mitoch shehutra l'tzorach v'sham mishlo l'tzorach. Whatever the reason is, there's a broader concept that Beis Hillel subscribes to on Daf Yud Beis, and therefore you can take out a tinok, a child, you can take out a lulav, all these things. Basically, even if there's very little reason to take it out, you can do it. So here also, shchita, right, which is mutter v'letzarach al nefesh, not to shecht an animal, and the malach of shchita presumably is also because of chabura, because you're releasing blood from the neck of the animal. So therefore, it's mutter to shecht an animal. It's clear from the Masechta base you're allowed to shecht an animal on Yom Tov. So therefore, any type of chabura is necessary also. And even if it's not for ochel nefesh, not for eating, it's mutter over here to be boiled, because what are you going to do chabura? But it's mutter. El Mata, if you want to say that, mutter lasses mugmar v'yom tov. So then we shall allow you to do mugmar on Yom Tov. We talk shehutra v'aletzarach, l'shnam v'shalotzarach. One of the malachos, right? The Rishonim discussed that now we don't say mitoch by all the malachos, only certain malachos that are mentioned in the Gemara. But Havar is one of them, kindling a fire. So therefore, you're allowed to kindle a fire on Yom Tov also for a mugmar. What is mugmar? So people said that article is incense. I don't know what they're talking about. Incense, they used to give perfume to their clothes, to their kalim, to their utensils. I don't know what this means, but I do know present day what present day mugmar is. If you've seen these e-cigarettes, you know what an e-cigarette is. The predominant company is a company named Juul. They have nicotine, but maybe substantially less than actual cigarette. It's supposed to be a replacement for cigarettes, maybe to wean you off cigarettes. It's I think run electronically. It doesn't actually use fire. So this is mugmar. Mugmar has fragrance. Yeah, they have different flavors of this, whatever the oil or the liquid that you put in, that you smoke, that turns into vapor. That's what I think mugmar is. So the Gemara says mugmar also should be mutter, and the Gemara in base is clear. Mugmar is not mutter on Yom Tov. So right? You can't allow mugmar because it has to be something which is shava l'chol nefesh for everybody. And not everyone smokes, and certainly not everyone does e-cigarettes. Let's say you're trapping on Yom Tov, you go hunting on Yom Tov, right? Right, you go to Yom Tov, you go to shul for 3 hours, then you have a meal for 3 hours, you go learn the base measure for 3 hours. Right before mincha, you want to go to the forest and hunt some deer, right? Sounds like a Yom Tov activity, right? Well, the Gemara felt it was a Yom Tov activity. It's Damalo Svi, right? The Gemara is assuming you're going hunting, just you put a trap, and actually, instead of I don't know, whatever you're hunting, I don't know, a Svi, a deer came into your trap. You're hunting for bears, I don't know. You're hunting for foxes, I don't know. You want to get the fox hair, I don't know, for your strimal. Anyway, you got a deer over here, so you trapped it. So therefore, you should be mutter to shech the svi on Yom Tov. You shouldn't be allowed to. Not everyone eats venison, right? Venison is considered very expensive. It's actually forbidden to kill deer in a lot of places, and venison, the sale of venison is probably more expensive than a rib steak or lamb chops. So it's very expensive. Only really refined, really rich people enjoy venison. So it's not Shavuot Chol Nefesh. Most people, they're not even eating rib steak. They're eating chicken on the bone. So how can you say it's Shavuot Chol Nefesh? And we know, and the Gemara assumes it's obvious, you could shech the svi and you could eat it on Yom Tov. How could that be? So the Gemara says, should also be also to shech it. Svi is, the Gemara rejects that. You say svi is not for everybody. It is for everybody. And the Gemara leaves it at that. Now, I want to leave it for Iyun Ben Sion to discuss this Gemara because I find it very practical and very relevant to my life and very relevant to Hilchos Yom Tov. And in discussion, we're going to talk how the Gemara gives basically a ruling about actually smoking a regular cigarette on Yom Tov. Are you allowed to light a cigarette, right? And smoke that cigarette, which is clearly Havara on Yom Tov, are you allowed to do that or not? I believe the Gemara gives a ruling over here. It talks about e-cigarettes. You can infer about regular cigarettes. And I want to explain this Gemara more about the difference between eating venison and smoking e-cigarettes. We'll have to get more of that even with venison. You want to find out. Basically, just tip of the iceberg is that um, even though venison is considered a luxury item, but potentially it could be something which is everybody's need. If everyone became Ashirim, they would need that. It's not just they want that, right? Nefesh, right? Something has to be a sorech kol nefesh. Eventually, it could be something which everyone would want. Cigarette smoking to begin with is not something that everyone needs. If you don't start smoking, you don't feel like you need a cigarette. If you're addicted to cigarettes, you probably need a cigarette. Do you need e-cigarettes? That we'll have to talk about. That would be just the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to discuss there. Check it out. If you're watching this video and you don't watch Ian Ben Zion, you're breaking the link in the chain. There's a link in the chain. You think that these shiurim are connected. I mean, if you're listening to one, you got to stay for the other. 8 to 10 minutes. Come on. You don't have 8 to 10 minutes listening to Ian Shear, best Ian Shear in the world. Instead of going to Punovich and listening to a share for an hour and a half, you got 8 to 10 minutes. You don't have 8 to 10 minutes? And you have to travel all the way to Punovich. Imagine you live in America. You got to fly away to Tel Aviv, and then you got to drive to Bnei Brak. Then you got to get into Punovich. Not going to let you into the yeshiva so quickly. So, this is better. All right, in my opinion. All right. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yaakov Baridi, Hore Rabbi Yochanan b'Tzaidan, also live up b'Tchila b'Shabbos. He gave a psak halacha. You can't have bia tchila, bia rishon on Shabbos, and mika horah iser. Does it make sense to call when you ask for something that's called a horah? The Gemara basically means that a lot of times when one of them asks for things, it's not because they know for sure they're giving a horah. They're not deciding a matter. They're just not sure about the matter. So in Misafik, they say something. So there's no horah iser. Most of the time, the Rabbanim give psak la'ad iser because they're not sure, so they just go iser. Whereas in that, now we do find a case. Haru beis hilash dein 0 shanim acheros. There's a case of Hilni Amalka. Hilni Amalka was actually a real person. Helena, she lived right before, I think, like 30 BCE. She was the mother of Munbaz HaMelech. She converted to Judaism. She's mentioned more in Sukkah. She became a very big problem. She's a fan of the Rabbanim at one point, and the Gemara in Sukkah says, and she has on her grave, she has says Sarah Malchasa. Don't know what the connection to that is, but she was a very prominent woman, and she converted to Judaism, and she kept all the halachas, right, about her children in the Sukkah. We learned in Mizak Sukkah. So she said if her son returns from battle, she's going to take Nazirus for 7 years, so that she should have a merit to come back. Nowadays, you go to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, you got a bracha of Rav Chaim Kanievsky not allowed anymore. You go, you pay 40 shekel for them to daven for your name 40 days at the kosel. Here, this is some serious nefesh. You're going to 0 for 7 years if you wanted something to happen. If you wanted her son to return from battle. He did return, but she kept in the zeros outside Eretz Yisrael. Outside Eretz Yisrael is chutz la'aretz here. It's too much midarbanan. So they paskin that it wasn't valid. She has to take another 7 years in the zeros, 14 years in the zeros. That's a real horah, right? Because she was a queen and she was very powerful, and she's obviously looking for the kula, and they gave her the chumrah. You have to be sure about that chumrah. When a person's looking for a kula and you're machmir, right? You have to be sure about that. That's a real horah. Where it says, let's say the spinal cord in an animal gets cut most of the way. The Rabbi Yaakov, that makes it a treifa. Rabbi Yaakov, I feel a nike. If it gets a hole, that's enough to make it a treifa. Rabbi Yaakov. The paskin halachas of Rabbi Yaakov. Horala Isser over there. Right? We'll have to, when we get the treifa from the school, we'll have to figure out why this is a horah over here. Amar Huna, ein halachas Rabbi Yaakov. Not relevant to Mizak Suot. The halachas not like Rabbi Yaakov. Right? We do paskin. You need rov the shedra to be cut in order for it to be a treifa. Rav Nachman Yisrael Masti Haki Amar Rabbi Bao Shal Rabbi Shmuel ben Yaakov ben Tzur as Rabbi Yochanan at Seidan. Ani Shami. He asked Rabbi Yochanan in Seidan, a place called Seidan. I heard what he said. Ma libo t'chil b'Shabbos. Amalei Asra. He said it's Asra. Hilchasa. The Gemara paskins motel libo t'chil b'Shabbos. Like we explained in Inon Ben Sion, the reason is because you have the rov and it's a psik reishay. It's a davar shein maskal. When passing the Reb Shimon, rov became batalia. Go back to Inon Ben Sion. On Daf It, you'll see a clear explanation why it's mutter. Amar Richava, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Yava, Bar Zav, Amar Rav Achas Psula, Achas Almana, Tuna Bracha. Whether you're a Psula, a virgin or not a virgin, you get bracha. When you get married, you share brachos. Umi Amar Rav Huna Hachi. Rav Huna will say, Amar Rav Huna Almana ain't Tuna Bracha. Almana, a widow, meaning she's a bula. She previously was with a man. Right? She doesn't deserve Sheva bracha. So kasha. Kama bracha shenas almana. Kama alma shenas almana. If it's a guy who's never been married, a bacher, right? He's a virgin. The man's a virgin. He's marrying a woman who's not a virgin. So therefore, you get Sheva Brachos for 7 days, presumably. If they're both widowers, so then they already had their simcha one time each. So therefore, there's no Sheva Brachos. Whereas the Alman Shanasa Almana lo, they don't get Sheva Brachos. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Lihuna Bar Nasantana. How do you know the Makor that when you say Sheva Brachos, you have to have 10 people present, right? At Sheva Brachos, there's usually 10 men there. You know, at Sheva Brachos, you have to make sure there's 10 men. Upon him Chadash, we'll talk about. When Ruth married Boaz, he took 10 people. He said, sit there. And they said, Boaz, right? Why did he need 10 people? Obviously, it was for Sheva Brachos. And Boaz had previously been married, and Ruth had previously been married. So when Mayin Atuna Bracha, Amar Rav Huna, Ayin Atuna Bracha called Shiva. And Almosh marries an Almana, widowers, they don't need a bracha called Shiva, but Yom Echad Atuna Bracha. The first day, the day of the wedding, that day they need Sheva Brachos. We said in Daf Hey that by an Almana they made sure she had Simcha, right? Simcha, she should be happy. 3 days, her husband should be with her. But what are we talking about? You're a Bakar, if you're talking about the husband was never married, he's a virgin, Amar Shiva. We just concluded that you need 7 days of Sheva Brachos. But Almon, Amr is Yom Echad. If it's an Almon, you need only 1 day of Sheva Brachos. People confuse Sheva Brachos, meaning 7 days of Sheva Brachos. No, Sheva Brachos there are 7 brachos that you say. Sheva Brachos is not because there's 7 days, it's because, like the Gemara says, you can have 1 day of Sheva Brachos. Because it's just a day that you say Sheva Brachos. How about Yom Echad? Ibai Sema, so the Gemara says, Ibai Sema, Ba'almon Yom Echad, Ibai Amar Shiva. Ibai Almon Amar Yom Echad. If we're talking about a man, both the woman and men have previously been married, so he said 1 day. So where does 3 days come in? And the Gemara says 3 days. It was talking about an Almon who married an Almana, right? So they get 1 day like included of Sheva Brachos, like Boaz and Rus. But still, Simcha, the Gemara makes a difference in Simcha and Sheva Brachos. The Simcha, what Simcha? The Simcha of being newly married, that they wanted the husband to be with her 3 days. The Bachar Shiva LeBracha V'Shlosh Simcha. Alternatively, you can say, and it says 3 days, and even talking about an almana who marries a bachar. But they're Sheva Brachos, because he's never been married. So they get 7 days of Sheva Brachos, but since she's an almana and she's previously been married, he only has to be Misameach her for 3 days. The Gemara clearly distinguishes over here between Simcha and Sheva Brachos. We're not going to talk about that today in Yom Ben Sion. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk about that in Yom Ben Sion to explain more the idea of Sheva Brachos. Meisivei. The Gemara on top of Zion of Beis asks, Mevarchin Psula Shiva Almana Yom Echad. The Brisa says for a psula, a virgin, you have 7 days of Sheva Brachos. And Almana Yom Echad. Ma'ila Afil Almana Shenises LaBachar. Doesn't mean Almana says generically in all cases, even if she's married to a virgin, right? She should only get 1 day. And we've concluded previously, no, 7 days. If there's a Bachar, he's never been married, you get 7 days of Sheva Brachos. Lola Almons. No, the Brisa is talking about an Almon who marries an Almana. They're both widowers. Aval Bachar, my Shiva. So the Gemara says, what are you going to say? If she marries a Bachar, she gets 7 days. Yihaki listing of Ark and Psula Shiva. Be clear, the Bride should have been clear. If they're both virgins, so then 7 days. And if she's a bachar who marries an almana, also 7 days. And if she's an almana who marries an almon, so then it's 1 day. Be clear, we don't know what to say. So Gemara says, Milsab Siksa Kasani. Gemara says, it could have said that, but the Brisa just wants to tell you clear halacha. So Leka Psula, the Batsar Mishu, Leka Almana, the Batsar Miyamecha. It's just telling you the bare minimum. If you're a Psula, the woman's a Psula, she at least gets 7 days. No matter if the guy's an Alma, even an Alma, if the guy's been married before, her first time she's been married, the woman, it depends, she always gets Sheva Brachos. And Almana, sometimes she gets 1 Sheva Brachos, sometimes she gets 1 day of Sheva Brachos. If she's marrying a Bachar, she gets 7 days of Sheva Brachos. If she's marrying an almon, a widower, then she'd only get 1 day of Sheva Brachos. Gufa, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Lihuna Bar Nasan, Hanayin the Brachos Ksanim Ba'asar. How do you know? We quoted this more before. How do you know when you do Sheva Brachos, you need 10 people? Boaz took 10 people. Why do you take 10 people? Obviously to be the requisite minion for the Sheva Brachos. Rabbi Avau, Amar Mahacha. Rabbi Avau is a different source. Makelos Birchu Elokim Hashem Kar Yisrael. Makelos is a kal, right? We learned from the Meraglim, Kal is usually 10 people. Ada, right? Ada is the bare minimum for a Kal. Kal is at least 10 people. You bless Hashem in Kar Yisrael. In Kar Yisrael, from the Makor is a reference to the womb or vagina of the woman. So when at least in Makor, when we're talking about Sheva brachos. That's the whole idea. She's getting married. That's the main focus over here. So you need a kal. You need 10 people. Rav Nachman b'hai krad Rabbi Abba my darish. What does he do with the pasuk of Rabbi Abba? How do you know when they cross Yamsuf? How do you know even the fetuses in the mother's womb? They even said Shira. Shneimar Makilas Berachel Elokim Shim Korban Yisrael. There's a drasha. There's a Agadita that they also said Shira. Shneimar, they have certain powers to say Shira even if you're a fetus. Ve'ida, what do the other opinions say? Well, that pasuk. If it meant to say they're saying Shira in the womb, say mi beten. My mimkor is really a reference to the source, which is the vagina. The Gemara, they say the article seems to say the womb, but I don't think it means that. This game makar is vagina. That's what we're talking about when she gets married. That's the psulim, where the psulim is. That's the reason that they're getting married, and that's why it depends whether it's 200 or 100, whether she has psulim or not. So then where's the Rabbi Avo? My high crowd of Nachman, my darish pay. Rabbi Avo, what does he do with the pasuk of Nachman? How mi boile midrash amoni la'amanis moavi la'moavis? Why were there 10 people over there? Because he needed to proclaim to everybody, not that he needed 10 people for shower brachos, he needed 10 people to proclaim over there, because people would say, wait, she's from Moab, right? Rus is from Moab. How can you marry Moab, right? It says in the Torah, Moab can never be married to Klal Yisrael, right? So the Gemara says, the Gemara darshans only a man from Moab or a man from Ammon. So he wanted to tell everybody, make sure people didn't have the misconception he was doing an Aveira. That's why he let her marry Rus, because she was Moabis. She was a woman. These if you'll say they need 10 people for shower brachos, lo sagi lav zakanim. Why do you have to say zakanim? Zakanim are elders. People are knowledge. You don't need 10 people of knowledge. You go to any sheva brachos. There's many amaratim there. It's okay. And the other opinion says the reason you need 10 people to tell it, proclaim everybody that they should know he's not making a mistake. Lo sagi lav asar. You need to have a 10. Even 2 people should be okay. Where it says, for assuming milsa, yes, to make it a public matter, to publicize it, you need more than 2. 10 people is more publicizing. He wanted to tell a halacha that if you want to give a gift to an uber, a fetus that's not yet born, you can do zikui. Zikui means I give it to somebody else, and he makes a kinyan for the uber. Right? It works. Even though it's davar shelo bala olam, he's not in the world. And he wanted people, this was a disputable, contestable claim. So he wanted people to know that's the halacha. So he told 10 people, go proclaim this is actually the halacha. The Gemara just concludes, technically the halacha is it doesn't work. So even though he told 10 people, it was all in vain. That's not the halacha. You say berachas chasanim, which is the common sheva brachos, in the house of chasanim. When you're celebrating, have a meal to celebrate the wedding, you do that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer af beis ha'erison. He says even when you get engaged, when you have sudas ha'erison, you get engaged. You make these sheva brachos. I don't know, Abaye, Yehuda Shano. Rabbi Yehuda just meant to say in a section of Israel called Judea, which is the southern half of Israel. Because in Yehuda they had the minhag of doing yichud, the aris and arusa. After they got engaged, they would spend time together in seclusion. It was common for them to even have bia over there. So the reason they did sheva brachos is because the Gemara in Maseches Kala says, Kala b'la bracha asul b'bay like anida. If she didn't have sheva brachos yet, so therefore she's like a nida. So to avoid the problem of her being like a nida, right? So therefore, obviously she went to the mikvah, so she's not a nida also. So then there's no more problems over there of yichud, and bia technically would be okay. Or we're going to see in the Gemara that really technically midrabanan is usher to have bia, but seclusion is okay as long as you have the sheva brachos, and as long as she went to the mikvah, so then you can do seclusion. And if it comes there, they have bia with each other, it's okay. The article brings this, says, source of this minhag in Yehuda traces back to what happened with the Romans, that, I'm not going to get into this. You can look it up in here in footnote. Where is it? In footnote number 21 in the Art Scroll. It talks about, this went back to a gzeira that the Romans had against the Jews, that they would take, like the Gemara mentioned in Daf Gimel, they would take, one of the officers, the prime minister, would take the wife every time, the newlywed wife, the newly engaged wife, before the husband. So it's the only reason she should be mutter to her husband if it was ba'ones, not baratzon. So therefore they were secluded, so they should be familiar with each other, libo gaspa. They should have a liking for each other, not just a friendship, but also, an intimate relationship. So therefore, if someone else tries to be with her, she's not going to do it baratzon, she's not going to do it willingly, because it's her first time. She'll have practice, she'll have seclusion, a sort of intimacy, a hug and a kiss, whatever. beforehand, so she's with the Roman comes, she'll do it bonus because she really has a desire for her husband. That's in the card. Look in the footnote 21. Tanya Idach, Mavarach and Birchas Hana, Beis Chasana, Birchas Erisin, Beis Erisin, Birchas Erisin, my Mavarach. What is Birchas Erisin? This is commonly we make under the Kabbalah also, my Mavarach. Ravin bar Rav Ada, Rav bar Rav Ada, Tarvai Mishmei Rav Yehuda Amri, Barakata Hashem Al-Kinim Al-Cholam, Asher Kishem Savasivano, Ala Rayos. Also on Sarusos, Hidilanas and Suach De Chubba Kiddushin, right? We say Birchas Kiddushin, right? Right before the man puts the ring on the woman's finger. That's what you say. The Rav says, the Messiah Kiddushin says, the Rav Achabri, the Rav, Messiah Mishmei Rav Yehuda. He has an ending to the bracha. Bracha Hashem Kali Yisrael Yidei Chubba Kiddushin, which is how we practice. Mandala Chastim immediately have a Berachas Peras. The first opinion says you don't have a conclusion. You don't say Bracha Hashem Kali Yisrael Yidei Chubba Kiddushin. The reason he says it, it's like the Berachas Erisin is just a Berachas HaMitzvah. Kiddushin maybe is a mitzvah according to the Ran. Hechsher mitzvah, or it's like a Peras, a Berachas Nenin. It's a short bracha basically. So therefore, there's no reason to say a second bracha. Then Mandala Chastim immediately have a Kiddushin. The one who says they actually make a separate bracha is because just like Kiddush on Friday night, you make a Borei Gafen and then you say Adem Mekadesh. I say that every night, but I'm losing memory over here on the camera over here. Mekadesh Hashavas Yisra Azmanim. No, what else? Can't remember it on camera. But anyway, there's a conclusion at the end of Kiddush also. Because it's a digression in the middle, you talk about something else. Instead of talking about Hashem, you start talking about Shabbos also. So therefore, since you got off topic, you have to conclude it with another bracha, thanking Hashem. Here also, Asalan Sarusa, Hitan Asua, Alichoba Kiddushin, right? First you're talking about Arayas. Arayas are usher. You can't marry Arayas. And it starts talking about that there's an Isser for Arusos, but once you got Alichoba Kiddushin, so there's really two different topics over here. So therefore, you need a conclusion. You need another bracha, put it back on track. Mekadei Shal Kiddushin, we're talking about Choba Kiddushin over here, so therefore, you need a bracha. Then, which is how we paskin. Why is the bracha Choba Kiddushin? Usually it's Kiddushin before Choba. So, you have to wait to Masechet Kiddushin to fully appreciate what I'm going to say right now, but I'll just tell you like this, that Arusa and Kiddushin are not the same. Arusa and Kiddushin, even though the Art Scroll and all your Rebbeim will tell you in vain, not in vain, they'll tell you until they're dry in the throat, they'll tell you it's the exact same thing. There's a reason there's two different words. Eris and Lis and Nisuin, which is common, betrothal, that's the way we normally do it. We have fiancés, we get engaged, we get married. Kiddushin is a totally different practice. Kiddushin is something, I don't know if I could say on air like what really I think it is, but if you know what Nikiya Muta is in Islam, maybe that can help you explain what that is, but it's something totally different. And Hijran is like the Chuppah Kiddushin. Chuppah is the conclusion of the second step in Erisin. First you have Erisin, Chuppah, which is Nisuin, carrying her onto the Chuppah or onto the canopy bed. And then Be'ila is the third step where she becomes Baal V'ishto. There's three steps over there. Kiddushin is a one-step process. Masechet Kiddushin, Kesh Sarabia. You don't necessarily chuppah after that. Kiddushin is a totally different thing, and that's why the Gemara says chuppah Kiddushin. You're allowed to get married two different ways: chuppah, the regular way that we get married, and Kiddushin, which when we get to Masechet Kiddushin, I'm going to explain more what it is. It's a totally different process. We don't practice that nowadays, technically. So that's the conclusion of today's share. I hope you enjoy. Stay tuned for Eating with Ben Sion. We're going to talk more about smoking a cigarette on Yom Tov. If you are a chronic smoker and you're wondering and you can't get a heter to smoke that cigarette on Yom Tov, don't worry, I'm going to give it to you. Stay tuned. Bye.